Many years ago, in the land of the midnight sun, there were trolls and there were Vikings. Trolls tended to keep to themselves in their caves. The Vikings, they typically tended to keep to themselves along the fjords, where they had their boats and their farms. But one night, when it was getting dark out, a family of trolls sat around a fire cooking grøtris, or rice pudding. They loved that stuff. And just as it was simmering and they were putting in the butter and a little sugar and cinnamon and taking their first bite, something else began to sizzle. And it was not the porridge. It was something in the sky. They looked up in the heavens, and there, flying high above them, was a ball of fire. They'd seen flying stars before, coming down from the skies, but they had never seen one so close. In fact, this one appeared to be heading towards the mountain. They watched it. They looked and noticed that it was going right towards their cave. They set their porridge down carefully as not to upset the porridge, because no matter what was going to happen, you don't mess with your porridge. That is good stuff. Quickly, they ran up towards the cave, and while they were running, they heard a big boom. It was like a bomb had hit. Although bombs had not yet been invented, that's what it would be a comparison to in our day. So, they went up there, and as they went up, the night sky became brighter. There was a fire up ahead, lighting up the sky. And as they walked closer towards the fire, one of the little trolls fell into a ditch. Well, troll children were known to be a bit clumsy, but then the father fell into a ditch, and father trolls are not known to be so clumsy. This ditch had not been there just a few minutes prior, and from the ditch they started to hear a sizzle. Their naked feet were starting to get cooked on red-hot rocks. Something had dug through the ground. Well, they quickly bounced out of the ditch. They walked along the sides of it, following where it went to. Something had struck with such velocity that, like a great big hoe pulled by 100 mountain trolls, it dug through the ground. And there in the distance, they could see where something had stopped, right near the face of their cave. There it was, a great big ball of fire. The trolls, they approached it carefully as not to burn themselves. And they were a bit worried. Would they be able to get into their cave? It was so close. They came around and there was enough room to get into their cave, but circling around this ball of fire, they noticed that it wasn't as hot as they thought it might be. In fact, they grabbed a couple sticks, and they took the sticks and they poked it. Well, if you've ever been around a big bonfire, you know that you couldn't grab a stick to poke it. You would get melted just trying to get that close. Well, this surprised the trolls too. They could poke it. Whatever they were poking felt a bit like a rock. They poked it, and then they pulled their stick out, and to their surprise, it wasn't on fire. So they felt it carefully. In fact, it was cold. It was ice cold. Well, whatever it was glowing, and there was smoke coming off of it. This is a new version of the first true Super Troll story. Yes, Gabriel. Well, looking at this meteor that had landed, they weren't sure what to think. They threw some rocks at it. It just made a big hard lump. They poked it with more sticks and they were cold. Then they had an idea. They threw a bucket of water at it. And as the water got close, the smoke got higher. It was almost like pouring gasoline on a fire. But there were no flames. But whatever was in there was glowing bright. Well, this had been quite a bit of excitement for the night. They weren't about to let their porridge go to waste. So they went back down, grabbed their porridge, and came back up to the cave. They sat around this new phenomenon and ate their porridge, discussing amongst themselves what they thought it might be, what they thought it might mean, and what they might do with it. Well, there were many different opinions among trolls, because trolls can be very opinionated. They decided it means they had different ideas. Yeah. So they decided they'd sleep on it. So all the trolls went to bed. Early the next morning, they got up to check out the meteor. To their surprise, it was gone. Those Vikings, they thought, those Vikings must have come here and stolen it. It was probably something precious, something powerful. Oh, those Vikings probably thought it was from their silly, silly Norse god, Thor, the god of thunder. Ah. They looked around and saw no footprints and no signs of Vikings having come and dragged anything away. They would have needed horses, and there were no horse footprints or anything. But then, where that meteor used to be, was a puddle. It was a big puddle of green goo, almost like tar. Well, again, they took their sticks, and they poked their sticks into this big puddle of green goo, took them out, and as it was like tar, it was stringy as they pulled it out and sticky. And they touched it with their fingers a little bit and immediately wiped it off on their clothes. What was this? Well, as little children trolls, one of them named George in particular, who was very curious, started looking closer.
His name is not George, his name is Jefferson.
Well, that was one of his brothers, Jefferson. There was Jefferson, George, and Gabe.
Be quiet.
So, the little trolls, like you guys, were a bit rambunctious and sometimes a little pushy. So when little George went over to the pool of goo to poke his stick into the gooey spot, his brother Gabe got a little bit jealous and pushed him. Oh, that was not nice. And little George plunged right into that goopy gunk and got covered in green stuff. Oh, that was not a very fun thing. Immediately, his parents grabbed other sticks, pulled him out of the goop, and onto the ground. What were they going to do? What were they going to do to clean this kid up? The stuff was so sticky and icky. Well, they got some sticks and started to try to rub it off of him. It didn't seem to do the trick. They thought, we better take his clothes off. Took his clothes off of him, thinking that there wouldn't be any of this sticky, goopy green stuff on him. But his whole body, he looked like the Incredible Hulk. He was covered in this green stuff. So they quickly took him down to the river. And when they took him down to the river, they got ready to put him in the water. When something strange happened. As the little Georgie troll walked down towards the river, he started to get a little bit sweaty. And it was almost like his sweat was washing off the goo. But none of the goo was dripping. When they looked closer, it almost appeared like his body was sucking up the goo like it was some kind of fountain of youth lotion. His skin seemed normal. When he got to the water, there was none of the goo left. The parents thought maybe it just evaporated. Kid smelled okay.
What does evaporate mean?
Evaporate means that the sun dries it out. Yeah. So the parents thought, he stinks like he normally stinks because, as you know, trolls don't smell good. They think they smell good, but we wouldn't think they smell good. So he smelled like a normal stinky troll. And they decided they didn't need to throw him in the water, but that they would take him back up to the cave where the other trolls were deciding what to do with this big puddle of goo. Well, obviously it had proven itself to be a bit of a dangerous hazard in front. They didn't want the other children pushing each other into this, so they decided they would put some rocks on top of it and bury it. They'd cover it all up. Now that's an important detail that you're going to have to remember in Volume 3. What happens with this buried goo? Well, it was all buried up and covered. It was quite a bit of work because they tried to cover up the ditch too. In fact, they put all the trolls to work. From the littlest to the biggest, they were all helping bury that ditch up so no other trolls would get hurt. They were tired by the end of the night. And little George, that troll, he was quite a good worker. So by the end of the day, he was tired. So decided that he would go to bed. He got in his bed and it had never felt so comfortable. There's nothing like a hard day's work to make a bed nice and comfy. He laid down, put his hands behind his head, and he slept. And that night, he had the craziest dreams a troll had ever dreamt. He dreamed that he was flying through the sky. And trolls don't typically dream of that. Trolls typically dream of hiding underneath bridges and grabbing goats and eating them. Things like that. They don't dream about flying. In fact, trolls don't like to be in the air that much. That's why they go in caves. So, to him, this was strange. He was flying, and he was jumping up and down, and taking these leaps over mountains and hills, and grabbing trees, and throwing them like a javelin. He was a super troll in this dream. When he woke up, he was a little disappointed that it wasn't real. But he noticed, and he looked down on his hands, that he had a little bit of sap on them. Must have been from all that work the day before. Then he also noticed that his neck was a bit sore. He noticed that his bed was feeling quite uncomfortable. You see, his older brother, Emmett, had gotten to be quite a big troll, and the bed was no longer big enough for him, so he inherited it. Laying in that bed, his head had to be bent sideways, and his feet were like stuck through the bars at the bottom. Oh, those brothers, they played another trick. Just the day before, they threw him in this big gunk of goop, and now today, while he is so tired and sleeping, they took away his bed and put a baby bed there. Those jerks. Man, they never stop playing tricks on little George. Then he got off his bed and he went to sit down on that little big stone next to his bed so he could put his clothes on. Well, those guys, they must have pushed that stone out of the way. All that was left was this little boulder that he could pick up in his hand. He took it and he thought, you know what? I wonder how strong I am. And he squeezed and crack. He actually broke that. He's pretty proud of himself. Trolls are strong and trolls can break rocks. But he broke that pretty good and thought maybe it wasn't actually a rock, but a dirt clod. But he liked to pretend that he was pretty strong. Well, As he stood up all the way, he found himself bumping his head on the ceiling. Oh my word, he thought. They didn't switch my bed, they switched my whole room. Those stinkers took me and put me in one of the baby rooms. Ugh. You see, they saved the caves that had short ceilings and little rocks and little beds for the little trolls, and he was getting to be a bigger troll. So that wasn't very cool. He hit his head on the ceiling. Man, that hurt. Made him mad. He thought he'd go out and get a breath of fresh air and kind of relax and cool down. So, as he walked out of the cave, it was a bit dark. He was having a hard time kind of seeing where he was going. And there he saw the light. For a second, he thought maybe he took the wrong way out of the cave, because this was one of the smaller cave exits. Then he remembered it was the right cave, because the day before, they had buried all those piles of goop that were right in front of the cave, and they must have brought in extra dirt and buried the front of the cave so it wasn't as tall as it used to be, because he used to barely be able to jump up and touch the ceiling of the cave there at the entrance, and now he had to bend over or else he'd hit his head on it. That's funny. Things couldn't be sillier, he thought. But he was happy. It was a nice day out. And there he could hear the goat. And one thing that trolls like is goat milk. And so he called over to the goat. Bah, bah, bah. That's one way that trolls call goats. And here came the goat. Well, he thought it was the goat, but again, something weird was going on. There was some deformed baby goat that came up to him. I mean, even for a baby goat, this thing was small. That was disappointing, because there's no way he could milk something that tiny. So he looked around for more goats. In the process, he noticed the trees. Man, that meteorite must have knocked down some of the tops of these trees off, because those trees were a lot shorter than they used to be, too. That thing had caused a bit of havoc there in that little troll community. It was a bit crazy to him. Well, he decided to walk down and get a drink from the river. He did that, and he came and noticed that that river, with summer approaching, was starting to dry up, because it wasn't as big as it was the day before. There must not be as much water coming down. In fact, he was so thirsty he started to drink and noticed that the water downstream was disappearing because he was drinking it all. Wow, he'd never done that. Drink a stream dry. He heard about the mountain trolls of old doing stuff like that, and he was feeling pretty cool, but he also knew that that stream was pretty tiny. Then he heard his dad yelling for him, "George, come up, it's breakfast time." Well, he was about to give his dad an earful. He was going to tell him what his brothers had done to him and how they're playing all these tricks on him. And he could see his dad up there. He thought he was closer to the cave than that. His dad looked like a little ant from where he was. He started walking, and as he walked closer and closer to the cave, his dad, as normal, looked bigger and bigger, and not quite as big as he expected. In fact, as he got next to his dad usually looked down at him and said things like, "I love you, little boy. You're the cutest little troll around, me little goot." Well, his dad was looking up at him. This caught George by surprise. What in the world is happening, Dad? His dad's mouth dropped open as he looked up at his son. Easily the biggest troll around. Something very crazy was going on. When he noticed the surprise on his dad's face, his dad quickly noticed the surprise on his son's face. He said, "What has happened, George?" "I don't know, Dad." And as the troll started to cry, his teardrops were so big that they were landing on his dad and making his dad fall down onto the ground. said, son, calm down. There's got to be a reasonable explanation for this. Okay, Dad. Whew. Well, he decided that he would talk to his dad about it, and they'd get some of the other trolls around there and ask what was going on. But the other trolls were like, holy cow, something is up. What happened? They couldn't explain it. And then they realized George was the only one who'd fallen into that big goop pond. Something had changed his DNA. He had changed overnight. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, they thought. Well, at first he was scared, but then he thought, you know what? This is kind of cool. You know, my dad used to take me and scare the dickens out of me by throwing me up in the air. What is he going to do to stop me now, thought George. So he grabbed his dad and he said, Dad, let's do some playing. Tossed his dad in the air. His dad looked so scared he wasn't surprised he was going to wet his pants. Caught him. And he threw him up again. And he caught him. This time, he bent his legs, tossed him up in the air while his dad was screaming and realized he'd kind of overdone it. In fact, he started to run towards his father, and he wasn't going to catch him. And he knew if he didn't catch him, his dad was going to die. So he jumped as far as he could, and he reached out like Jerry Rice, getting a pass from Steve Smith or Joe Montana. And there it was, touchdown. But fortunately, he did not spike his dad, because that would be painful. What he did do was he caught his dad and realized that he hadn't landed yet. He was still going through the air. Not only had he grown to large proportions, but the young troll had superpowers. He could fly. This was pretty darn cool. Well, he was still learning how to do it. And as he went flying along, he tried to land. And as he landed, he kind of messed up, but he was able to curl around his dad so his dad wouldn't get hurt. When they stood up, they realized they were right in the middle of one of the largest Viking villages around. And when the Vikings noticed them, they were not happy. Well, George was pretty big, but he was still afraid of Vikings. He grabbed his dad and started running. His dad said, fly, as arrows were coming at him. And he jumped. Oh, but he came back down. And as he did that, it shook the ground and boulders started rolling. He jumped again. Same thing, came back down. He had to figure out this flying thing. Then, to his surprise, he ran and there was a cliff. And he couldn't stop. He thought, uh-oh. And then he started to drop, and all of a sudden he looked up and he could fly again. It was something to do with how he moved his head and stuff. He was flying, and it was so cool. His dad thought it was pretty cool, too. And he flew, and then he landed in a place called France. People were weird there. They talked weird, they looked weird, they didn't shave their armpits. They thought trolls smelled bad. Well, these people from France were worse. So they got out of there pretty quick. And then they flew across the ocean. Oh my word. And then landed again. And it was like the same thing. The place, they called it Quebec. And they sounded kind of like the French people, but a little bit different and even weirder. And they smelled funny too. It's like, we gotta get out of here. So they kind of flew back towards home. And they landed back in Norway. And they were really glad. Wow, that was quite the adventure for a young troll in the land of the midnight sun. And Soon his legend was spreading around as being Super Troll. And later you'll hear the tales of Super Troll and how he saved the trolls from utter destruction to have them be the most powerful creatures in the nether regions of the Northland.